Hi, and welcome to my talk on Leadership from the Trenches, DFIR Master's Guide. Everything a DFIR Master needs to build a sustainable and effective team. This is a talk about leadership from the trenches, and it's going to be focusing on the technical leader as they rise through the ranks into one of InfoSec's toughest fields, digital forensics and incident response. One of the main things that makes this a extremely challenging field is the fact that DFIR is actually two completely separate fields, digital forensics and incident response. And so for the context of this talk, I want to focus primarily on the incident response parts, the crisis management side, and then have digital forensics sort of as sort of the secondary, smaller focus. So from this session, I hope that you will walk away with what it takes to be a good leader, what a leader must do to build the right team, how to sustain this team over a period of time. I like to call it the DFIR Master's Guide to Success. So here is the agenda we have for today. And I like to go over sort of a quick bio, and then we're going to look at sort of some of the successful traits of a technical leader, the recruitment strategies that you'll need to have, as well as some of the staff career pathing options that you need to have as well. And then finally, we look at the training and equipment that will make this team successful. So then let's, without further ado, move on to the next slide. So who am I? My name is Neumann Lim. I'm a senior manager at Deloitte. I've about 14 years of experience in incident response and digital forensics. I lead sort of a national practice across all of Canada, dealing with some of the largest Canadian breaches, whether it's in the healthcare sector or government sector or financial sector. That said, I do work with a lot of our government clients, and like I said, helping them with defensibility studies, tabletop exercises. This experience kind of gives me kind of a good look into how to build teams, especially teams that are national. From that, like I said, I've got been asked to speak at some of the other conferences. So Great Hat Con is one, Blue Team Village, HTCIA Canada, as well as the CISO Summit and CCTX here in Canada. From a contact perspective, I am on Twitter. So on the left-hand side here, you'll see that my Twitter handle, so CyberStrap blog. Feel free to follow and add. That said, I'm also on LinkedIn. So similarly, feel free to connect. I do mentorships on Mondays. And like I said, if we connect, we can definitely have a chat about some of the challenges that you may have, especially in this particularly difficult field. So, congratulations, you have made it as a security leader. Success. So what that typically means is that you probably have, a couple of years of experience under your belt, probably done countless investigations, been extremely successful helping your clients, and survived and thrived in one of the most challenging industries there is. So in short, and probably in some of the responses that you've done, you are the hero and savior of your clients. And you're still around, which means you haven't burnt out yet, which in itself it's already an achievement. As we know, this is a very common occupational hazard in our field. A lot of people burn out from this because of the long hours that we have to work, the insane times at which incidents can happen, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning, sometimes over holidays. It's tough. Like, we know this is a really tough industry. All in all, you are at the top of your game, professionally, technically, and now you're the leader of a team. You have that responsibility now to your staff, as well as your clients, your partners, your business stakeholders. So how can you become a better leader, especially a technical leader that has to lead from the trenches? So I'm going to jump right ahead into what I consider are my top 6 attributes, not just, like I said, for technical specialists, but also for effective leaders. Number 1, you'll need to be an extremely good communicator. As you know, most incidents do require a mature and effective speaker. This is to help with stakeholder management. You will need to discuss and translate often difficult technical terms into simpler language for the legal teams, for business teams, so that they understand what it means to them and what is at stake. Um, it's also likely you probably have this skill already, but we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means when it comes to a team dynamic. So, client facing, I understand, but at the end of the day, we are here to build an effective team. Second attribute, be an even better listener. So as you progress as a leader, you've probably seen countless challenges. You've probably seen countless incidents. You've probably heard a lot of dirty secrets from your clients. So being a good listener makes sense in this case. You are literally the confidant, that trustworthy, reliable individual. And so all of that really comes with the territory. So you need to listen, you need to process, and then you need to orient, your strategies and your next steps. And this is really, really critical. And it goes a long way in fostering trust and professionalism with teams that you will eventually lead. The next attribute is to have integrity. So from an investigative perspective, like our industry, is governed by the scientific method and the evidentiary process. You need to check, double check, triple check in some cases to make sure that when you do speak, when you do have those written reports, everything that you say, you write is accurate, true, and honest. So mastering this sort of in context of the team management components is also very vital. So yeah, that's important. The next attribute is be humble. Understanding that this is again another very tough industry. It's very easy to just be the boss, to lead from the front, and that's okay. But there is a far more effective leadership strategy, and that is to understand your team's experience, put yourself in their shoes, walk a mile with them, see their challenges, support them in the hard times, and of course, celebrate the successes that you have. See, a good leader doesn't always take the credit, they give it. Be that humble leader. And I think the most integral skill that I want to really mention here is you need to have the ability to influence and motivate. And particularly when we're talking about the DFIR industry, look, in crisis, it's very difficult to motivate and to coordinate. There's a lot of stress that goes on. The environment, the infrastructure is on fire. Things are obviously in a very, very bad way. Situation is very chaotic. Your leadership ability to restore calm and also keep your team on task while working those long hours and continuously motivate them to continue the efforts effectively. This is one of the most impressive and rare leadership qualities. And if you have that, you will be extremely successful in the DFIR industry. I'm going to be constantly talking about this as sort of the focal point for the rest of this presentation. So you're going to hear a lot about this one. Last but not least, empathy. So we hear a lot about this in leadership circles, what it takes to be an empathic leader. As technical folks, we sometimes often do dismiss the values of these social sciences. It is what it is, right? But in this case, there is a lot of value for us to pay attention to these trends of leadership. As mentioned earlier, you need to be able to have that ability to put yourself in your team's shoes and like I said, walk that mile with them and of course, ultimately celebrate the successes. So if you have that, I think you'll be successful as well. So on to the next slide. I want to really now focus on leadership attributes that will make you successful in DFIR. So what does that mean? So first, as we mentioned earlier, is the ability to be calm under fire. That's kind of a given. But the second one that is linked very closely to that is coordination. So coordination in the midst of chaos and stress. Coordination is important, right? And particularly during crisis mode, you need to have management by objectives, right? You'll need to be able to prioritize tasks quickly and according to your team's strengths. So that's something that we'll definitely talk about later on. So Being able to do this during a crisis really relies on that deep understanding of your team, the team dynamics. All of that has to be done ahead of time. So I would say take the time to understand your staff's strengths, weaknesses, their passions, their goals. And if you can do that, that's going to be a very important trait that will lead you to success. The next one I do want to talk about is delegation. And again, to delegate is not just to it's not just to help yourself, but it also does benefit the team. Let's be frank, you as a leader, you can't take on everything yourself, no matter how tempting it is. This is especially true for those who come up, from the ranks as technical specialists. You will need to allow the team members, your team members, especially the more junior ones, to learn and grow as professionals in their own right. And in order for them to do that, you need to expose them to the experience. You need to put them, in situations that that will allow them to grow, that will allow them to challenge themselves. So as a leader, it is up to you to delegate some of those tasks and create that supportive space for them to succeed. And then from there on, like you said, it will help you and the team overall as they start to grow. One very quick word of warning, and that has to do with micromanagement. So beware of that danger. I've seen this in the past before with other leaders. It's easy to sort of throw your team members into tasks that they're not quite ready for or confident into to complete without appropriate support. Other areas would then be to kind of micromanage all of their actions, and that ultimately will lead to failure and will definitely frustrate your staff, especially if they are capable of handling the duties or tasks at hand. So let's try to avoid that. But again, it depends on the management style. But let's try to avoid the micromanagement components. Next attribute I want to talk about is the courage to respectfully challenge. And this is vital for two main reasons. First one is to overcome confirmation bias. So we all know that in our industry, it's very easy to kind of make hasty decisions. In particular with IRs, we are often presented with imperfect evidence. And sometimes they do all point in one direction. Again, keep in mind, it's imperfect data. So a good leader needs to have the courage to then challenge it and say, look, we understand everything is kind of pointing in that direction, but let's take, another perspective. Let's have a counter opinion and see what we find. And maybe we can find evidence that we may find stronger evidence to redirect the investigation. So we need to have leaders that have that courage to do that. Again, like I said, this is to help overcome confirmation bias. The second reason is to challenge the status quo. And the reason for that is to really push the boundaries of what is already known within the environment. And this will ultimately help to foster innovation and improvement along the lines of, like I said, growing this team, right? So if you can do that, we can definitely help the team grow. So this can be done in really two ways. First, you need to set some ground rules for the team on what is acceptable and encouraged. So you want to encourage differences of opinion. Sometimes that can lead to arguments. So that's why you need to set some of those ground rules. The second one that you need to, and as a follow-up to that, is to encourage respectful dialogue within the team, including challenges to your own ideas. So yes, you're the boss, but be open with the folks, allow them to challenge your ideas, have that encourage that respectful dialogue. And like I said, direction from yourself, direction from the team where appropriate. And last, well, sorry, not last, but the next attribute that I think will be very successful as well is sort of learning agility. Leadership from the trenches is the title of this talk for a reason. Your team is very likely going to be looking to you for guidance and advice, especially during the chaos of an incident. It is up to you to sort of steer the ship. The best leaders that I've seen are able to foster an environment where the team is open to continuous learning. And that also includes continuous learning during an incident, right? So this is I mean, this could be learning and adapting to changes of adversarial techniques on the fly, for example, or maybe even learning about the latest threat intelligence or research, and then incorporating some of that back into the response. So as the gray beard, the gray haired on this team, it's your experience that's going to be extremely vital in effectively navigating this environment. So my advice to you is share your knowledge, share your experience, coach, mentor your team, and that will help them to become successful. Last but not least, the attribute I want to talk about is outside. So while in the trenches, it is very possible and very likely that most team members will get tunnel vision. But for the leader, it is actually vital for you to be able to extricate yourself and take a look at things from the bigger picture. As the leader, you should also be able to understand sort of the overall threat landscape, and then from there, position resources from above, and inform the team of sort of the overall response strategy or investigation strategy. So that's really what outside is all about. And so if you're familiar with these traits, I think the next step now is to then say, okay, well, how do I put together this team? So now we'll go into team assembly. And so, like I said, in front of every leader is a great team. That is a quote that I found from the internet, and it speaks true in this particular case. So building that team. So first and foremost, you need staff members that do align with your goals. But let's talk about this from a business perspective. So say, for example, the business goal is to build a jumbo jet. But your staff's goals, unfortunately, are to just build a paper plane. So as you can see the misalignment here, this is not going to work. That is why we're going to have to align the goals to be successful. And to make this happen, you will really need to, as a leader, you really need to scrutinize the hiring process. You need to spend the time to craft the right job description, specifications that matches the real needs, and that the qualifications match that. So avoid over asking and avoid the acronym soup, right? So work with HR on this. Help them understand what is realistic, what realistically that you're looking for. Help them recruit the right candidate, and that will really help build, the overall alignment of the team. The next attribute is team cohesion. So that is extremely critical. Members need to exhibit a mutual drive towards the aligned goal. There needs to be a sense of camaraderie. We often hear the phrase cybersecurity is a team sport, and in the case of DFIR, it really is. So cohesion needs to be strong, and you as the leader, you need to foster that. This will ultimately lead to the next point, which is relationships. Relationships, like I said, you need to really understand your team. So each individual, you need to go and gather sort of their strengths, their weaknesses, their passions, their goals, their drive, and kind of work with them, build that rapport with them, and understand what it takes, to motivate them. And this will go back to that motivation and influence point that I spoke on earlier. So building good relationships will ultimately strengthen the bond within the team and also to the leader. And this ultimately enhances team cohesion. The next point, and this is a very important point, is you will need people on your team that will challenge you and hold you accountable. And when you really drill this down to the bones, it's really about having diversity in a team. So having a diverse team. And keep in mind, diversity isn't just a convenient buzzword. It is strength and advantage. Think of this logically. The best teams, in the world out there are those with a variety of experience, a variety of approaches, a variety of different skill sets, a diversity in perspectives, and most importantly, diversity in backgrounds. So this will allow you to create the most fertile ground for creativity and development. Having all of these different opinions, also creates the best opportunity for innovation, creative thinking, creative problem solving within obviously a very challenging field as it is. A diverse team, if done correctly, will most likely be able to recognize threats very, very quickly and twice as likely to creatively solve the issues and risks at hand. Again, this is why we really need to work with HR. Um, don't get stuck in sort of the absolute fits, must have these X, Y, Zs, must have these types of experience to the job description. If we do that, we're going to probably end up missing some very, very good, talented people that don't quite fit the mold. So my advice to you is, let's break the mold. Let's open it up and see what we find, because we're going to ultimately find diamonds in the rough. So what does that mean? Okay, so now we need to look at recruitment. So first I want to talk about, okay, well, you're getting to the point where you're now going to start to recruit, and you're going to have to retain some of that experienced talent. And I will go further on at a sort of a second point to talk about how we can break that mold, as previously mentioned. Okay, congratulations. You have found a unicorn. You've managed to find one of the experienced folks in our industry. We all know experienced folks are very hard to find. There's extreme competition for them. Even in a large firm like mine, it can be very challenging. It is often, very difficult and an ongoing challenge for us to compete and attract good talent. So one thing I want to keep in mind with regards to unicorns is that there's always going to be a challenge to keep them, and they're always going to be considered a flight risk. There's always greener pastures somewhere else. There's always more money somewhere else. So to an earlier point, it is really important that you establish a relationship with your unicorn, understand their needs, again, their passions, their strengths and weaknesses, get to know what their career aspirations are, and support them getting there, in whatever way you can. If they feel supported and if they're getting what they want, they are very likely to stay. So that is really sort of the recommendations that I would have in this particular case. The next scenario is I want to go through you finding a junior and breaking that mold. So what does that look like? All right, congratulations, you have found a junior. These are what we would consider the diamonds in the rough. We all know talent is rare already. You found a junior that matches, your real needs. Just like, focusing on unicorn retention, the focus here is really about development. So you'll need to develop this raw talent. The junior needs to get the experience. You need to train them. You need to spend that investment. And trust me, you're not going to regret this investment. It's going to be very beneficial in the long run. Let's be frank, this is a tough and tiring gig working in DFIR. So really don't be shy to build your team in such a way that it can function without you. And that's really kind of the goal here. Not only does that mean that you actually get days off as the leader, but it also means that you're doing, the best job possible to help grow and develop professionals within the industry at large. So let's think beyond sort of the borders of our own organizations and think of this as developing the future of our field. And with that in mind, I just want to really quickly talk about one subject, and that is, gatekeeping. So folks, look, we have a problem here in our industry. I'd like to give you a real world example of an individual that was a mentee of mine. She had no experience in our industry. She has a hospitality degree. HR would never have put her into a pile of potential candidates. But yet, after getting to know this individual, knowing that they have passions in forensics, they really have a very good attention to detail. They have good drive, encouraging them to take some courses, encouraging them to blog about their experiences. They are now a successful forensics analyst at a very large, global corporation. Again, this individual just needed that opportunity. Zero experience off the bat, worked in hospitality. Nothing, no one would have looked at this individual. Again, we need to stop that. We need to give individuals a chance. We need to eliminate the gatekeeping, and we need to do better. So I would say stop having a bias towards only finding experienced people, and stop preventing juniors from coming into the industry with requirements that don't make realistic sense, and give them the opportunity to gain that experience. I'm just so tired of seeing job postings that say, oh, you need 2 or 3 years of experience for a junior role. You need a CISSP for a junior role. Like, how is that realistic? So my advice to you as a leader: remove the barriers. Give somebody an opportunity. You might very well find, a successful candidate like this individual that I talked about, one of my mentees. Not only that, just by giving this individual an opportunity, it creates loyalty. It gives a young and emerging talent the chance to bloom. And really, to do the opposite is really setting ourselves up for failure. So please, 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 don't gatekeep. Try to break the mold. Try to take in folks that don't have the experience, but give them the opportunity. Train them, guide them, give them that chance. That said, we are sort of kind of in midstream of our talk. I just want to very quickly summarize all of the key leadership attributes that we've covered so far, and then move on to an example about how we can go into looking at career pathing and tooling and training for the staff that we have. So leadership strategies, again, summary is, like I said, behind every great team is a great team lead. And again, this is a quote that I got from the internet. So, as I had talked earlier, these are just some of those good leadership attributes, right? Empowerment, that makes sense. Coaching, being respectful, having that respectful dialogue, having that respectful challenge to like I said, the status quo. Building that trust, building those relationships, encouraging your staff to take on roles, to take on different tasks. Yeah, we all understand people do like stability and certainty, so we need to also help foster that. And then during the growth of individuals, rotate their roles, do some cross training. And last but not least, the most important one: train like you fight, train like you train, fight like you train. And trust me, you're going to see a lot of that in the next few slides. That said, if you are a new leader and you're looking for some good articles or learning resources, I highly recommend you take a look at the Center for Creative Leadership. They have a lot of good free articles on there, good learning resources. There's a blog that's very, very, I would say, up to date. Yeah, you as new leaders, technical leaders, please share. Please take a look at some of these free resources and learn and share it. So now we're going to take a look at sort of the career pathing. I'm going to give this an example. I'm going to put together sort of a generic makeup of a DFIR team. So obviously, this may look very different depending on sort of the company that you work for. One of the key aspects, like I said, you're going to see it later on, is the training component. All right, so without further ado, let's take a look at sort of a typical career path. So we typically start with the different types of roles. So the IR analyst will be the most junior member of the team, most likely going to be doing a lot of the response work. Here you're going to see they're going to need a lot of training, equipment, and tools to be successful. You'll have the forensics analyst. This is a more specialized team member. Will do most of the forensics work. Again, requires a lot of training, equipment, and tools to be successful. malware analyst, another specialized team member, analyzes malware, passes that information back to the team. Again, the last point, it keeps repeating itself. I don't think I need to mention that anymore. CTI specialist, specialist member, again, processes that PIR. So helping your team very quickly, very nimbly react to some of the new threat intel that come in, the new research. And then using that information then to give back to the team and to enrich some of their investigations. Last but not least, the team lead, which is either yourself or maybe you have a second in command. This will be the most seasoned member of the team. This person typically as a leader will have more of a logistical team support role. They may have the ability to jump in as a technical leader to help in any of the other roles. So this would, like I said, would be either yourself or your second in command. So what does career pathing really look like? So, with the IR analyst, we're going to start with zero experience. They're going to have to learn the tricks of the trade, learn the ropes, most likely spend about a year honing their skills. Towards that end of the year, you might want to offer them sort of some foundational training, tools, vendor training, and by the end of their year, or maybe even the second year, more formalized certification training like SANS. Obviously, this is going to depend a lot on the individual and their learning experience. I've seen some folks pick this up so quickly, and they're ready for SANS training within the year. And then, of course, like you said, once they hit sort of the second and third year, they're very comfortable with their own skills. They're comfortable with what they have. You want to give that team member sort of the option to specialize. So now you open it up to, like I said, the CTI roles, the forensics roles, the malware analysis roles. And of course, once they pick one of these based on their passions, again, you're going to spend the next few years first and foremost training, learning the trade, picking up skills, understanding the tooling, and then building that confidence in the next couple of years shortly after that. So that's why there's about 2 to 3 year period before they're fully comfortable with themselves. That said, just be careful not to limit people in those roles. Try to create opportunities for cross-training. So give them the opportunity to pivot, to move around and try different roles. This will help keep your staff engaged. Also, there is dual benefit of creating sort of a deeper and more resilient team. So, you have folks that have, both CTI and forensics training, for example. And of course, depending on the specialization, sometimes specializations can take longer than 2 years, depending on, like I said, the educational components. So it is important to give them the time to build their confidence. And then towards sort of, I would say around 5 or 6 years down that line, that individual, that team member may now be ready for team leadership. So again, the caveat here is be careful not to throw people into this too soon. Leadership does take away quite a bit from the technical components of the job. So like I said, make sure that people are comfortable first. And then obviously they are confident to take on that role. So you will most likely need to mentor, and you'll most likely need to provide some shadowing opportunities as they grow into that role. And then hopefully at some point you'll be able to pass the baton on to them as the technical leader, and then move on and join, I guess maybe the senior leadership team from that on, and then have that individual then take over your role. And so that will be the ultimate, I would say, in sort of career pathing. So the next steps now is to really look at how you can equip and train your team. So here's some strategies. I'll start by talking about how DFIR tests. It's extremely tedious if you try to do this manually. So that's why we need to focus on getting the right tools. So some of the tools of note, these are things that we do use in my firm. So from a forensics perspective, we'll have things like some of the more professional tools like Magnet Axiom, FTK, NCase, X-Waves. For memory forensics, we'll look at volatility. For malware analysis, we'll use some of the more commercial tools as well. So IDA Pro. Some folks are comfortable with Ghidra, and Ghidra is free, so why not use that? Another one that we do use is PE Studio, and that's a really good one that we have in our toolbox. For network, the standard Snort, Suricata, Zeek, Akamai. There's a lot of vendor tools out there that do packet analysis. I don't want to go too far into that, but like I said, there's hundreds and hundreds of network vendors. Similarly, on the log analysis side of things, also lots and lots of vendors that cover that space. The few that I do highly recommend is take a look at Velociraptor, OS Query, and from a very basic perspective, understand how to create Sigma and Yara rules. So those would really help kind of crawl through the log analysis components. So that said, really invest the time to build knowledge, really invest the time for tooling. This will ultimately sort of shave time off your investigations. And again, if you arm people, your people with the right knowledge, it's going to empower them to make better and quicker decisions, especially during those crisis moments. And last but not least, while you're supporting your clients in their crises, just keep in mind that you also need to provide the same sort of crisis support for your own teams. Calling them up at 3 a.m. in the morning, having them super tired throughout the days, those long days. Make sure that they have PTO, provide maybe free parking, cover some daycare, especially if they're working the long hours. Last but not least, we know that during investigations, there are some sensitive information, images, and not everybody can handle that sort of emotional and psychological stresses. So counseling may be one that you would like to offer your team members as well. So with that in mind, that really covers everything I want to talk about during this presentation. I like to kind of forward over to a credits section as well as shout outs. So photo credits, obviously Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons, you see Capcom for a lot of the images that I've used here. Thank you very much. You were a big part of my childhood as a big nerd. I love Dungeons and Dragons. The next shout outs are to the industry. So Joe Slurick, I took your CTI class, highly recommend taking his class. He taught me a lot about CTI. Brad Duncan, I took his class on malware network forensics. Phenomenal individual. Definitely take a look at those. Brett Shavers taught me pretty much everything about forensics. I read all your blogs, took a look at a lot of your tools. Steve Haley is my first instructor that gave me that helped me pass my first cyber cert. So I always do remember him. Steve Didia. So I love all your tools, sir. I still use them today. You make my life a lot easier. Thank you so much. And finally, Blue Team Village for all the support over the years. Anytime I have a problem, I do get online and ask them for help. And of course, I'm on Twitter, the InfoSec Twitter malware team. Lots of good intel, lots of great things that come out from this team. So special shout outs to James, Execute Malware, VK, Luke. Thank you so much for kind of guiding and helping me along the way. That said, I will move into the Q&A section for my talk. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and ask. Thank you.